My name is Nora Hughes. I'm 37 years old, and I work as a financial director in Madison, Wisconsin. The story I'm telling you happened 3 years ago, during Christmas 2022. To help you understand why that single sentence, except one, felt like a knife to my child's chest, I need to take you back to the beginning, to the invitation, to the mistake I made when I convinced myself my mother might have changed. A week before Christmas, around 10:00 a.m., I was at work, staring at spreadsheets that blurred together like rainfall. My office was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your phone buzzing sound like an alarm. When I saw Mom flash across the screen, my fingers froze above the desk. I didn't pick up right away. 8 years. That's how long it had been since she'd treated my family like we existed. 8 years without a call to check in. 8 years without a birthday gift for my child. 8 years of silence so complete it felt intentional, like she'd erased us to make a point. I answered on the fourth ring. Her voice was gentle, not loving, not warm. Gentle in the way a person speaks when they want something. "Nora," she said softly, "can you bring your family home for the Christmas party this year?" I sat back in my chair, as if distance could protect me from the weirdness of that question. "My family?" I repeated. "Yes," she continued, as if it was normal. "Bring your boyfriend, and bring your daughter." My stomach tightened. My mother didn't say my boyfriend's name. She never did. It was always him, like he was a stain she refused to acknowledge. For a few seconds, I could only hear her breathing on the other end of the line. It sounded heavier than I remembered, older. But I didn't let sympathy fool me. Without thinking, I said it plainly. "I'm not coming." Silence. Then her voice dropped, almost a whisper. "I'm getting old. I want the family together during the important holidays." Something in her tone scraped across my nerves. It wasn't regret. It wasn't love. It was urgency. Like a door was closing and she needed me to step through before I saw what was on the other side. I swallowed, staring at the window beside my desk where snow drifted down in lazy flakes, peaceful and unaware. "I'll think about it," I said. Then I hung up. The moment the call ended, my instinct rose like a warning flare. Something wasn't right. My mother didn't humble herself unless she had no other choice. But I pushed the thought away, because denial is the softest blanket in the world. It keeps you warm while the house burns down. That evening, after dinner, we sat together in our living room. My small, real family. My boyfriend was on the sofa, flipping through a book he'd already read twice, the way he did when he was trying to look calm for my sake. My daughter was on the floor with her crayons, drawing with the kind of focus only children have, like the world couldn't hurt you if you stayed busy enough. I hesitated, watching them both, trying to decide whether to invite fear into the room. Finally, I did. "My mom called," I said. My boyfriend's eyes lifted immediately, sharp with concern he tried to hide. "What did she want?" he asked carefully. I told him. The party, the invitation, the sudden softness that didn't match the last 8 years. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, the way he always did, like he believed my words deserved room to breathe. When I finished, he set his book down. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he reached for my hand. "I think you should go," he said. I stared at him. "After everything?" He nodded once, slow. "Because it's your family," he said. "And because—" His eyes flicked toward our daughter on the floor. "She deserves answers." Deserves? That was the thing about him. He was too good at understanding people who didn't deserve it. No matter how my parents treated him, he never tried to cut my past out of my life like a rotten branch. He just stood beside me and let me decide how much pain I was willing to carry. Our daughter looked up at the sound of our voices, her face curious. "Mom?" she asked. I froze for half a second. She rarely heard me talk about my parents. We had built a whole life without them, like you build a house away from a cliff edge and pretend you never lived there. She set her crayon down and tilted her head. "Who are Grandpa and Grandma?" she asked. "How come I've never met them?" The question hit me harder than any insult my mother had ever thrown. Because what do you say to a child? They didn't want you. They decided you weren't worth loving. My throat tightened. Before I could answer, she got up and walked over, small fingers tugging at my sleeve. "Can we go meet them?" she pleaded, eyes wide and hopeful. "I want to know what they're like." I looked at her, the child my parents refused to acknowledge, the child who still believed grandparents were supposed to love you automatically. My boyfriend didn't speak. He didn't pressure me. He just watched me with quiet patience, his hand still holding mine like an anchor. I forced a smile and brushed my daughter's hair back. "I'll think about it more," I told her. She nodded, satisfied with the promise, and went back to her drawing as if the world couldn't possibly disappoint her. That night I didn't sleep. I lay beside my boyfriend, staring into the dark, while my mind replayed my mother's voice over and over. I'm getting old. I want the family together. It sounded like a plea, but my chest didn't soften. It tightened. Because I knew my mother. She didn't suddenly grow a conscience. She grew a need. By morning, my daughter was already waiting at the dining table, dressed as if we were about to leave right then. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, she ran to me, practically vibrating with excitement. Are you done thinking? She asked, hope shining in her face. Can we go meet Grandpa and Grandma? I opened my mouth to say no. I swear I tried. But the hope in her eyes was too pure, too trusting, too unaware of the kind of cruelty adults can serve with a smile. I knelt and kissed her forehead. Okay, I said, we'll go. She squealed so loudly the neighbors probably heard her. She sprinted to tell my boyfriend, and he caught her, lifting her up with a smile that looked brave, but didn't reach his eyes. Over the next few days, my daughter prepared gifts like she was preparing for a fairy tale. She drew a family portrait. Me, my boyfriend, herself, and two smiling stick figures labeled Grandpa and Grandma, even though she'd never met them. At the bottom, in messy letters, she wrote, I love Grandpa and Grandma. Every time I saw that line, something inside me sank. My boyfriend prepared a small gift too. Simple, polite, the kind of gift you bring when you're trying to be respectful to people who have never respected you. When I asked him if he was sure, he only smiled. I know they might not accept me, he said quietly, but I'm going for you and for her. Christmas afternoon came fast. We drove from Madison to my parents' house in Janesville. It was only about an hour, but it felt like a lifetime stretched tight. My daughter chattered nonstop in the back seat. Are they nice? She asked. Will Grandma like me? Does Grandpa tell jokes? I kept my eyes on the road and forced my voice steady. I'm sure they'll like you, I said. But the truth was, I wasn't sure at all. I glanced at my boyfriend. He stared out the window, calm on the surface, but I knew him. I could read the tension in the way his jaw set, the way his hand stayed too still in his lap. We didn't say much after that, because we both understood the unspoken truth. We were driving toward a place we were never welcome. When we arrived, the driveway was packed with cars. Laughter spilled out from inside like music. My parents' house looked the same as always, large, polished, impressive, in a way that always made me feel like I was standing at the edge of someone else's life. My daughter jumped out first, clutching her drawing. This is their house? She breathed. It's huge. I took her hand, and the three of us walked up to the door. My father stood there talking to relatives. When he saw me, he nodded once, casual, distant, then turned back to his conversation like I'd just walked past him in a grocery store aisle. No hug. No, how have you been? No glance at the granddaughter he'd never met. My chest tightened, but I kept walking. Inside, my mother stood in the living room, surrounded by people who laughed too loudly at her jokes. The moment she saw my boyfriend, her eyes swept over him, head to toe, with a kind of contempt that didn't even bother pretending. Then she looked away, as if he was furniture, as if he wasn't the man who had loved me through every cut my family left behind. Before I could speak, the front door opened again. My older sister walked in with her husband and their two kids, and suddenly my mother transformed. Bright smile, open arms, kisses on cheeks, hands smoothing hair, praising the smart ones, the good ones, the real ones. I watched it happen like a slow-motion car crash, and my daughter watched too. She broke free from my hand and ran forward, holding up her drawing like it was a ticket into belonging. Grandma, she called, clear and loud. My mother turned, took the picture, glanced at it, set it down on the table like it was a flyer someone handed her on the street. No, thank you, she said flat. My daughter's smile faltered. My heart stuttered. I stepped forward, voice tight. Mom, she spent all week drawing that. My mother finally looked at me, cold eyes, no softness left. Then she looked down at my daughter and said, in a tone that sounded like ice pretending to be polite, Thank you, I'll keep it safe. And she turned away. My daughter stared after her, confusion blooming across her little face like a bruise. Mom, she whispered to me, voice small, doesn't Grandma like my picture? I crouched and pulled her into my arms, forcing myself to sound normal. She's just busy, I lied. My boyfriend's hand landed gently on my shoulder, a silent comfort. But I could feel him shaking, just slightly, like he was trying to hold himself together with willpower alone. We moved to a corner, trying to disappear. But families like mine don't let you disappear. Not when you're the entertainment. I heard whispers nearby, loud enough to be intentional. Is that Nora's boyfriend? Someone said. Then a laugh. I heard he's basically staff, right? A few people snickered. My blood went hot. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. The room quieted, not out of respect, but out of excitement, like they were hoping for a show. My older sister appeared beside me, hand landing on my arm, her smile smooth as oil. "Hey," she murmured sweetly. "It's Christmas. Don't make a scene." But her eyes were bright with something ugly, like she already knew how this ended. And in that moment, as I looked around at my mother's staged warmth, my father's indifference, the relatives' hungry faces, I realized something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't a reunion. It was a setup. And I didn't know yet what the punchline was, only that my daughter was sitting right in the middle of it. Then my mother stood at the head of the table, lifted her wine glass, and cleared her throat for her speech. The room leaned in, and my daughter, still clutching hope, looked up at her grandmother like she was waiting to finally be claimed. My mother smiled and began. My mother's voice sailed over the table like she owned the air. "Another year has passed," she began, holding her wine glass up as if she were blessing us, "and our family remains united, remains successful." People clapped on cue, not applause, not pride, obedience. I sat there with my boyfriend on my right and our daughter tucked close to him, her small fingers looped around the edge of her napkin like it was a safety rope. Across the table, my older sister, Camila, smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had never once worried about whether she belonged. Camilla Hughes, 4 years older than me, the golden child. When my mother said united, her eyes slid to Camila first, glowing with that look parents reserve for the child who never disappoints them. Then her gaze drifted past me, like I was a chair. I told myself I was used to it, but that was the lie I always told myself, because the truth was, you never really get used to being treated like a mistake. You just learn to swallow the pain faster. My daughter didn't know any of that history. To her, this was still a holiday, still a chance, still the beginning of a story that might end with a hug. She leaned toward my boyfriend and whispered, "Is Grandma going to smile at me now?" He froze for half a second, the way a person freezes when they're trying not to show heartbreak. He lowered his head and whispered back, "Maybe. Let's just listen, okay?" My mother continued her speech, listing the company's achievements as if she had personally carried every crate, every contract, every paycheck with her bare hands. "Our furniture manufacturing business has had an incredible year," she said. "New partnerships, bigger profits, more respect in the community." More clapping, more nodding, more relatives smiling too hard. And as she spoke, my mind drifted backward to the real beginning of this story. Not the invitation, not the Christmas party. The beginning was the day my grandfather died and took the last real love in that house with him. I was born into a well-off family in Janesville. My grandfather founded our wooden furniture manufacturing company in 1980. He wasn't born into money. He was the kind of man who built his life with calloused hands, the kind of man who smelled like sawdust and sweat and determination. When I was little, I used to sit in his workshop and watch him carve raw wood into something useful, something beautiful. He'd tell me stories about failing, about starting over, about getting laughed at by people who thought he'd never make it. And he always said one thing that branded itself into my bones. A person's worth is what they build with their own hands, not what they inherit. He died of a heart attack in 2000. I was 12. And the day we buried him, I felt like we weren't just burying a man. We were burying the only person in that family who ever looked at me like I was enough. After he passed, my parents took over the business, and everything changed. At first it was subtle. My aunt's son suddenly needed a job. My father's cousin wanted to be involved. My mother's sister deserved a position because she's family. But it didn't feel like support. It felt like a kingdom built on flattery. People with no skills got paid too much for doing too little, as long as they knew how to say the right thing at the right time. And then there was Camilla. Camilla fit perfectly into that world. She never questioned my parents, never challenged them. She studied what they told her to study. She dated who they approved. She married a man they adored because he came from the right family. Camilla wasn't just their daughter. She was their proof that their way was the only way. And then there was me. I was the opposite. From the time I was a kid, I didn't like being told what my life was supposed to look like. I didn't want to be a copy of anyone else's choices. I didn't want my future handed to me like a script. When I turned 18, my parents insisted I study business administration so I could eventually help Camilla run the family company. I refused. I chose finance, not because it was rebellious, but because it was mine. Because I wanted to build a path that wasn't already paved with my parents' expectations. I still remember that night like it's burned into my skin. My father slammed his hand on the table so hard the plates rattled. "What are you studying finance for?" he yelled. "This company is your future. Why don't you understand that?" I looked him in the eye, my hands shaking under the table, and said the truest thing I'd ever said in that house. I don't want my life decided by other people. I want to build my own career. My mother's face twisted like she'd tasted something bitter. "You won't amount to anything," she said, calm and cruel. "You'll come back begging us." But I didn't come back. After college, I found jobs on my own, paid rent on my own, built my savings penny by penny. There were months where I lived on cheap bread and instant noodles and still refused to ask my parents for a cent. And for that, they hated me more, because my independence wasn't just a choice. To them, it was an insult. At family gatherings, my parents bragged about Camila's promotion at the company, Camila's new house, Camila's new car. And when they spoke about me, it was always with a sigh. Nora is stubborn. Nora never listens. Nora thinks she's better than us. Then I met my boyfriend. And that was when the relationship between me and my family didn't just strain, it fractured. I met him in March 2013. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for quiet. I'd stopped expecting gentleness from anyone, because if you grow up in a house where love is conditional, you learn to mistrust tenderness. But he was different. He didn't try to control me, didn't try to fix me, didn't try to make me smaller to fit his world. He listened. He laughed like the world wasn't always waiting to punish you. And when I told him about my family, he didn't flinch. He didn't look at me like I was damaged. He just said, "That must have been lonely." That line broke something open in me. After almost a year of dating, I brought him home to meet my parents. I told them he owned a small restaurant in Madison. At first, they seemed pleased. He was polite, calm, handsome. He spoke clearly. He asked questions about the business. He didn't act intimidated by my parents' money, but he also didn't try to impress them. For the first time in a long time, I thought maybe I'd found a way to bridge the gap. Maybe they would accept him. Maybe I could finally stop being the outcast daughter. But 2 months later, everything collapsed. One afternoon, my parents and Camila showed up at his restaurant without warning. They saw him wearing an apron, carrying plates, helping his staff because one employee had called in sick. My mother snapped photos like she'd discovered evidence of a crime. My father called me immediately. His voice was sharp enough to cut. "Break up with him," he said, "right now. He's just a waiter. He lied to this family." I felt my hands go numb around my phone. "You're misunderstanding," I said, forcing my voice steady. "He's the owner. Today someone got sick, and he stepped in." My father didn't care. "A restaurant owner serving tables?" he barked. "Do you think we're stupid?" Then my mother grabbed the phone, her tone dripping contempt. "Let me tell you something, Nora. A man who lies from the start will lie more later. You want to marry a waiter?" It didn't matter what I said after that. In their minds, it was already decided. He was beneath them, and I was their fool. That evening, I told my boyfriend everything. He didn't explode. He didn't curse them. He didn't demand I choose. He just sat there, quiet, his eyes red but dry, like he refused to give my family the satisfaction of tears. After a long silence, he asked me one question, his voice trembling, not with anger, but with fear. "So, what are you going to do?" I took his hand and held it tight. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I believe you, and I believe in you." That was the moment I knew my parents would never forgive me. Not because of what he was, but because of what I chose. Back at the Christmas table, my mother was still speaking, praising Camila for bringing in major contracts, praising her children for being bright and well-behaved. My daughter sat quietly, trying to understand why her cousins got smiles while she got silence. Then a laugh bubbled up from somewhere behind us, soft, feminine, too familiar. I turned my head, and my stomach dropped. A woman stood near the doorway, dressed perfectly, hair glossy, lipstick precise, like she'd been waiting for her entrance. She wasn't family, but the way she looked at my boyfriend, like she already had history with him, told me exactly who she was. His ex-girlfriend. I hadn't seen her in years. My boyfriend barely talked about her, only that the relationship ended long before me, long before our daughter, long before our life. But there she was, in my parents' house, at my mother's Christmas party, smiling like she belonged. Camila noticed my stare and leaned toward me, her voice low, sweet as poison. "Oh," she murmured, "you saw her." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Why is she here?" Camila's smile didn't falter. "Relax," she said lightly. "It's Christmas. We invited a lot of people." But her eyes were bright, excited, like she'd just lit a fuse and was waiting for the explosion. My boyfriend's posture stiffened beside me. His jaw tightened. I felt his hand inch toward mine under the table, as if he wanted to warn me without letting them see fear. My daughter looked up at me, sensing something. "Mom," she whispered, "who's that lady?" I opened my mouth, and before I could answer, my mother set down her wineglass, her gaze sweeping over the children again, like she was preparing to choose a victim. Her voice sharpened as she announced, "I'm proud of all my grandchildren." She paused, and her eyes locked on my daughter, except one. My daughter blinked, confused. Then she turned to me with trembling lips. "Mom, is Grandma talking about me?" she whispered. "What did I do wrong?" And I felt something inside me break, slowly, painfully, like wood splitting along a hidden crack. Because I knew then, with sick certainty, the invitation wasn't about reunion. It was about humiliation. And my little girl had been brought here as the centerpiece of their cruelty. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything. The room felt underwater, voices muffled, faces distorted, laughter delayed like it belonged to another world. My daughter's small hand tightened around my boyfriend's sleeve. I felt it before I saw it, the way her body leaned toward us, instinctively seeking safety. "Mom," she whispered again, softer this time, like she was afraid of the answer. "Is Grandma mad at me?" My boyfriend's face drained of color. He pulled her into his chest immediately, one arm wrapping around her shoulders, the other pressing her head gently against him. "No, sweetheart," he said, voice breaking, despite his effort to steady it. "You didn't do anything wrong." Across the table, my mother stood tall, her wineglass resting calmly in her hand. She looked satisfied, like a performer who'd finally landed the punchline. A few relatives snickered. Not loudly, no, they were too practiced for that. It was the kind of laughter that pretends to be discomfort while feeding on cruelty. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The sound echoed, sharp and ugly. "What did you just say?" I demanded. My mother turned toward me slowly, deliberately, as if she'd been waiting for this exact reaction. "I said the truth," she replied coolly. "That child is not my grandchild." The words landed like broken glass. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped wire around my ribs and started pulling. "She's my daughter," I said, every word shaking. "Your granddaughter. You don't get to decide that." My mother's lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder. "Granddaughter?" she scoffed. "She's the child of a man who waited tables. You think I'm going to accept her as blood?" That was when my daughter broke. She sobbed, loud, uncontrolled, confused. Her small hands clutched my boyfriend's shirt as if letting go would make her disappear. My boyfriend bent over her, whispering frantically, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I've got you." But his voice was cracking now. His shoulders trembled. And that was when something in me snapped clean in half. I stepped forward, my hands clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. "Then why?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "Did you invite us here?" The room fell silent again. Every face turned. My mother opened her mouth, but she didn't get to answer. My older sister stood up instead. Camilla adjusted the sleeve of her dress, looking almost bored. "It was my idea," she said. I turned toward her slowly. "What?" I asked. Camilla met my eyes with a calm confidence that made my stomach churn. "I thought it was time you woke up," she said. "You walked away from this family, from the company. You married beneath us. I wanted you to see what you threw away." Something clicked into place inside my mind, sharp and horrifying. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was planned. "You invited us back," I said slowly, "to humiliate my child?" Camilla shrugged lightly. "I invited you back to remind you of reality." Then she gestured casually toward the corner of the room. "And to show everyone the difference." I followed her gaze. And there she was, the woman, my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. She stepped forward now, heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She smiled politely, too politely, like someone presenting evidence. "Hi, Nora," she said sweetly. "It's been a long time." I felt my boyfriend stiffen beside me. His hand tightened around our daughter's back, protective, instinctive. "What is she doing here?" I asked. My mother finally spoke again, her voice smooth and venomous. "We thought it would be educational," she said, "to show you what kind of woman and family you could have had." The ex-girlfriend glanced down at my daughter, then back at me, sympathy painted across her face like makeup. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know there was a child involved." But her eyes told a different story. They weren't sorry. They were curious. Judging. My boyfriend looked up then, his voice shaking with fury he could no longer hide. "You need to leave," he said. "All of you. This has gone far enough." My father finally spoke, his tone cold and final. "This is our house," he said. "If you don't like it, you know where the door is." My daughter sobbed harder. "Why do they hate me?" she cried. "Daddy, did I do something bad?" That was it. That question tore straight through me. I dropped to my knees in front of her, my hands trembling as I cupped her face. "No," I said, choking. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." Around us, relatives began speaking up, voices overlapping, cruel and dismissive. She should be grateful she was invited. This is a lesson. Some people need to know their place. Camilla watched it all with quiet satisfaction. My mother said nothing. My father said nothing. They didn't stop it. They wanted it. I looked around the room, at the people who shared my blood, but not my humanity. And in that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. These people were not my family. They never had been. My gaze fell to the table, to the drawing my daughter had made. Someone had pushed it aside. The corner was crumpled. Her careful letters, "I love Grandpa and Grandma," were smeared where a drink had spilled. My vision blurred. Slowly I stood. I wanted to scream, to overturn the table, to strike every smug face in that room. But then I looked at my daughter, shaking, terrified, and remembered the promise I'd made to myself years ago. I would never let my child see me become what they were. I picked up the drawing. The room went quiet. My mother frowned. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I pulled a lighter from my pocket, something I'd used earlier outside. A murmur rippled through the room. I flicked it open. The flame caught the corner of the paper. It burned slowly at first, curling inward, eating away at my daughter's love. I watched it turn to ash. When the fire reached the center, I dropped the remains to the floor and stepped on it. Then I looked up. "You don't deserve this," I said calmly. "You don't deserve her, and you don't deserve me." My father exploded. "Get out of my house!" I didn't argue. I turned and walked away, toward the door, toward my real family. Behind me, the whispers rose again, but I didn't turn back. I never would. Cold air slapped my face the moment we stepped outside. It felt cleaner out there, like oxygen rushing into lungs that had been suffocating for years. My daughter burst into tears the second the front door closed behind us. She ran straight into my arms, clutching my coat so tightly I thought the fabric might tear. "Mom," she sobbed, voice cracked and desperate. "Why doesn't Grandma like me? What did I do wrong?" That single question hurt more than everything my parents had ever said to me combined. I dropped to my knees on the driveway, ignoring the cold concrete biting through my pants, and wrapped her in my arms. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay strong. "Not a single thing. You're perfect. You hear me? Perfect." She cried harder, pressing her face into my neck like she was trying to hide from the memory itself. My boyfriend stood beside us, frozen for a moment. Then he knelt too, one hand resting on her back, the other on my shoulder. I could feel him trembling. Behind us, the house buzzed again with laughter, chatter, clinking glasses. Like nothing had happened. Like my daughter hadn't just been torn apart in front of everyone. That sound, normalcy continuing without us, felt like the final insult. I helped my daughter into the car, buckled her in, kissed her forehead again and again until her crying slowed to hiccups. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. "Are we bad people?" she asked. My chest constricted. "No," I whispered. "We're just not theirs." The drive back to Madison felt endless. No music, no talking. Just the hum of the engine and the weight of everything that had been said, and everything that never could be taken back. My boyfriend stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands locked around the steering wheel. I watched my daughter in the back seat through the mirror, her small body curled inward, exhaustion slowly pulling her toward sleep. When we finally got home, I didn't let her sleep alone. All three of us lay on the bed, the lights off, the house quiet. My daughter slept in the middle, one arm around me, one arm around him, like she was anchoring herself to the only safety she trusted. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the night again and again. My mother's eyes, Camilla's smile, the sound of that paper burning. And that was when I made a promise. To myself and to the two people breathing softly beside me. I would never let them hurt my family again. Not with words, not with guilt, not with blood ties they didn't deserve. From that night on, I cut them off completely. No calls, no holidays, no explanations. They were dead to me. 3 years passed, and real life began. I poured myself into work and was promoted to senior financial director. My boyfriend's restaurant didn't just survive, it expanded. One location became 2, then 3. We bought a new house in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where kids rode bikes in the street and neighbors waved without knowing your last name. My daughter grew. She laughed easily again, made friends, brought home art projects covered in glitter and spelling mistakes. She never mentioned that Christmas night. I didn't ask. Some scars don't need reopening. Occasionally, I heard things through mutual acquaintances. The family company was struggling. Bad management, lost contracts. Camilla had fallen into debt. Gambling, rumors said. My parents aged quickly. The relatives who once swarmed them like flies disappeared the moment the money dried up. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just distance. Until one Saturday afternoon, 3 years after that night, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and froze. My mother stood there. She looked smaller somehow, older, her hair grayer, her posture bent, her eyes sunken with desperation. "Nora," she said, voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." I stayed where I was, blocking the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked. Her lips quivered as she spoke. The company was nearly bankrupt. Camilla was drowning in gambling debt. My father had been in a car accident. Bedridden, helpless. The relatives were gone. Camilla's marriage had collapsed. "You're the only one who can save this family," my mother pleaded. "Please, come back." I listened without interrupting. Then I smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. Just clearly. "No," I said. Her eyes widened. "Can I at least see my granddaughter?" she asked softly. Something cold settled in my chest. "No," I repeated. "You don't get that right." I closed the door. That evening, after my daughter fell asleep, I told my boyfriend everything. He listened quietly. Then he said gently, "If you want to help them, I'll support you." I looked at him, the man my family had humiliated, the man who still believed in mercy. And I shook my head. "They made their choices," I said. "Now they live with them." He squeezed my hand, and I knew, without doubt, that I'd done the right thing. Because forgiveness is a choice, and protecting your child is not cruelty. It's love. That night, after the door closed on my mother, I stood in the hallway for a long time. Not shaking, not crying. Just empty. It surprised me. I'd always imagined that if my parents ever came crawling back, I would feel something powerful. Rage, triumph, maybe even satisfaction. But what I felt instead was distance, like watching a storm far out at sea, knowing it could never reach me again. I went back to the living room where my boyfriend was sitting on the couch, the lamp casting a soft circle of light around him. He looked up immediately, searching my face. "She came?" he asked quietly. I nodded. I sat down beside him and told him everything. About the debt, the bankruptcy, my father bedridden, my older sister's collapse, the relatives vanishing like smoke once the money dried up. When I finished, he stayed silent for a while. Then he said something that proved, once again, why I chose him. "They hurt us badly," he said gently, "but they're still your parents. If you want to help them, I'll support you." Those words hit me harder than my mother's begging, because the man my family had mocked, belittled, and humiliated, the man they called beneath them, was the one capable of compassion. I turned to him, my voice steady. "No," I said. "They made their choices. They watched our daughter cry. They laughed. They planned it. I don't owe them redemption." He nodded, accepting my decision without argument, without judgment. That was love. Later that night, I stood in my daughter's doorway and watched her sleep. Her face was relaxed, peaceful. The same child who had once asked me, "What did I do wrong?" now slept without fear, without doubt about her worth. And that was when I understood something fully, something I want every person listening to this to hear clearly. Forgiveness is not a debt. No one has the right to demand forgiveness from you after deliberately hurting your child. Blood does not excuse cruelty. Time does not erase humiliation. And family is not a free pass to destroy someone and then ask for help when you fall. Over the years, I've thought a lot about that Christmas night, about the picture burning, about the silence that followed, about how final it all felt. And I don't regret it. Because a real family doesn't test your loyalty by humiliating you. A real family doesn't use children as weapons. A real family doesn't decide your worth based on status, money, or obedience. A real family is built where there is love, respect, and safety. Today, my life is quiet in the best way. My work fulfills me. My boyfriend's business thrives. My daughter laughs freely, unaware that she ever had grandparents who didn't want her. And that's exactly how it should be. So I'll leave you with this question, the same one I asked myself at that door. If the person who once humiliated your child came back years later asking for help, what would you do? Would you forgive? Or would you protect the life you fought so hard to build? Thank you for listening to my story.